Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Port Skills and Safety Group meeting, part of Maritime Safety Week. I'm Robert Jervis. I'm going to introduce your speakers for this morning's session and also explain a little bit about how the morning's going to work. The first session is going to run from 10 till approximately 11 o'clock. At the end of this first session, we'll have a Q&A, and you can post the questions that you want answered on the swap card platform where you're viewing this now. There's a little panel to the right-hand side, and we will do our best to pick up those questions for you. We'll then have a 10-minute break where your screen will go blank. We'll let you know the exact timings just before we break, so you can go and get a cup of coffee, or you can also use the swap card platform to network with other participants. Then we'll go on to the second session, which is Maritime Skills. And again, at the end of that session, we'll have a Q&A, and you can use SwapCard to answer the questions, to ask the questions. We hope you enjoy this morning. It's a packed agenda, and I'm going to hand over now to Jen Maddison from the Port of Tyne to explain what that agenda looks like. Many thanks. Cheers, Jen.
Great, thanks, Robert. And good morning, everyone, and a really warm welcome today. I hope that you're all well. So yes, our PSS Group meeting today, we are going to start with an update from Port Skills and Safety from Rean, so thank you for that, and followed by an update from the HSE, so Nicola is going to introduce that afterwards. As Robert says, please put your questions into the Q&A box, and we can deal with those. Once we've got through those two presentations, as Robert says, we'll have a short break before we move on to the MAIB presentation and the discussions about the Trailblazer programme. So, Rean, I'll hand over to you for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen. All right, let's get this started. All right, can everyone see the starting page? Jen, can you see the presentation?
Yeah, I can see it as the SharePoint or as the PowerPoint rather than as the presentation slideshow itself. That's it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jen. All right, so good morning, everyone. So for today's agenda, for the update, I'm going to go over a little bit of what we normally do, just for the members who are tuning in for the first time. And there's also going to be some updates about the current progress on the projects that we have already completed as well. So the first standing item is the strategy overview. This is what we normally start off with. And then I'm going to give you an update on some of the projects that we have completed since the last PSSG meeting. The other standing item is an introduction to the PSS board members. So this is exactly who sits on our board and which areas of work do they champion. And then the last thing I'll do is go through a quick update on the champion areas and see what has happened since the last time we have met. So jumping straight into it. So starting off with the strategy overview. So the strategy was basically established around 5 years ago. So what happened at that time was in 2017, the board, the chairman of the board and the chief exec went out to your chief execs and simply asked them the question, what are the main health and safety issues you are facing at the moment? And what happened was, after you ask a couple of people the same question, you kind of start getting the same answers back. And then these things kind of triangulate, and you understand these are the main themes that are facing the industry. So what are the main themes that came out 5 years ago? The first thing is PSS as a thought leader. So basically, ports are busy organizations, and they wanted a body like PSS to let them know about the latest thinking that's happening in health and safety, environment, and skills areas. The other main theme was the accident plateau. At that time, we were having a considerable drop in the incidents in our annual accident stats. But what has happened is, after a certain amount of time, the decline started to get slower and slower, and it has now become almost a flat line. So it has plateaued in a sense. And the main concern at that stage was, are we actually on the plateau? How do we actually get off the plateau? Hold on a minute. Can people still see the?
I think you need to do your screen shares just dropped out, Rean.
Okay, sure. Give me a second. Are we back in business?
The PowerPoint pane rather than the slideshow.
All right, let me try that again.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
All right, sorry about that. So basically the one focus area was PS as a thought leader, and the second one was the accident plateau. So the decline in incidents is actually stopping, but it hasn't actually gotten off that plateau. We're kind of leveling it for the time being. So the thoughts on their minds was basically, how do we get off this plateau? How do we continue the decline in incidents? What do we need to start looking at to get to that? The next thing was the HSE and other delivery partners. So we are looking at the regulators and the other stakeholders of the industry. And at that stage, we were proactively maintaining a good relationship with these regulators. So we were looking at maintaining this going forward and making sure that we are on the right footing with everyone, and making sure that we're just proactively managing our own health and safety and keeping a good relationship with our stakeholders. The next theme that came up was health and safety culture. So the question here was, what does culture look like? How does human factors contribute to health and safety? And we needed to explore this area going forward. And the other two areas were improving data and early information sharing. So among the port industry, ports tend to be a bit siloed just because of the geographical distance between all the ports, and they did not share a lot of data in between each other. So the challenges going forward was, fine, we may compete in certain areas, but on health and safety, we shouldn't compete. So how can we use the data that we are getting from individual ports and use it at national level and share it, especially when it comes to accidents and near misses? How can we actually use that information to prevent incidents in other areas of the UK? So these were the main concerns for your port chief execs, and that formed the strategy review for PSS 5 years ago. So at that stage, PSS was mainly focused on safety and skills. So once the strategy was completed, PSS expanded into more areas. From core safety and skills, which tends to be the core safety was mainly the SIP documents and creating guidance for the industry. The skills were creating apprenticeship standards for the industry to understand what is best practice kind of, and have a standard for industry as such. We moved then into health and safety culture, which tended to be work that we're doing like with the University of Bath and developing a bespoke climate measurement tool. After that, we also moved into health and mental health, understanding what are the antecedents for this and where we stand as an industry. And once we know where we stand as an industry, we can understand where we need to improve going forward. So this was the strategy that we've held for the last 5 years. Now that we've gotten a new board, the strategy will be looked at again, but within the next 1 year or so, and just checking if are these areas of work still as valid as they were 5 years ago? Do we need to modify certain areas? Do we need to move forward on certain areas? Or do we need to add new areas into this? That will be done this year. So coming to port skills and safety, who are the people that actually work at PSS? So our chief exec, Richard Steele, has currently moved on. He is now the head of ICHCA, and we have a new chief exec that will be announced very shortly. Yours truly also is here as the operations manager. And as our events, finance, and office manager, we have Sharon Quinton. Our health, safety, and skills coordinator is Marcio. And our communications manager is Rob. Rob is currently shared among all 3 organizations. So he works for PSS, UK Major Ports Group, as well as the British Ports Association. We are having some more personal changes at the moment, and Marcio will be leaving us in the middle of this month. So in case you have any work pending with Marcio, make sure you shoot off an email to him before he actually leaves. As another personal change, I will also be leaving the organization in mid of August. So if there's anything else you need from me, make sure also you do send me an email before I finally do exit. So this will be my final PSSG with you guys at the moment. Now, moving on to the board members. So who are the people that are actually on our board? So from the Bristol Port Company, the chief executive and PSS chair is David Brown. From Forth Ports, the chief operating officer and PSS deputy chair is Stuart Wallace. From Kalmar, the vice president for South and West Europe, Dave Patterson. From the Port of Blythe, the chief executive, Martin Lawler. From the RSSB, the Chief Operating Officer, Johnny Shute. This is basically PSS, but for the rail industry. From Middlesex University, the head of natural sciences, my professor during my master's and also my dissertation supervisor, Dr. Alan Page. From the Port of London Authority, the Director of Marine Operations, you have Peter Steen. From Hutchison Ports, UK, the Head of Safety, Health and Environment, Eddie Scoggins. From Harwich Haven Authority, the Chief Executive, Neil Glendinning, and current Chair of the BPA. From Harwich Haven, the Chief Financial Officer, Jake Story. And we have one more position which will soon be filled, and again, an announcement will follow after that. So these are the board members for PSS. Coming on to the actual project updates. So the first project update we have for you is regarding the joint notice on dangerously weighted heaving lines. So since it is Marine Safety Week, this is a pertinent issue because this issue poses a significant risk to the maritime industry. And it's usually during when people are passing the mooring ropes or when retrieving messenger lines. If the heaving line is dangerously weighted, you can cause serious, if not fatal, injuries to the persons that are on shore side. And please note, there's also fines, or you can even have a criminal prosecution of the master. So, seeing that this is an ongoing issue in the port industry, and a couple of months ago, the trade associations got together and issued a joint statement. This statement was jointly signed by the British Ports Association, the British Tug Owners Association, Port Skills and Safety, the UK Chamber of Shipping, the UK Harbour Masters Association, UK Major Port Group, the UK Maritime Pilots, as well as the Workboat Association. So we basically got together and issued a notice to industry just to raise the awareness of dangerously weighted heaving lines. And in the notice, we basically asked for a more proactive approach to managing these heaving lines. And they called upon ship owners, managers, agents, port operators, and pilots to just take 3 actions to raise awareness about the heaving lines, which are dangerously weighted. The first action was simply inform any incoming vessels of the duties they have under COSWAP. Secondly, was simply issue them with the MCA Safety Bulletin 2. There's a copy of which is right up there. And the third thing was just to stress on the fact that fines, port state control inspections, and criminal prosecutions will be used against them if they do continue this unsafe practice. A link is available on our website to the actual notice, and you can download it and use it to create more awareness and just share that out more further. Okay, the next project update we have is regarding container lashing operations. So around last year, our members came to us and asked us to look at container lashing operations because this is quite a dangerous activity in the port industry, and no one was actually looking at it at that stage, and no one had managed to create a consensus at national level to actually look at this. So the first thing we did is we actually look at our stats and check, is there an actual issue in the port industry? Are we actually facing any particular issues? The first thing we have to look at is basically go to the accident stats and check and see, does anything actually correlate with this? So when we looked at the stats, over the last 3 years, out of 624 injuries, 100 of them did occur on container ships, which actually makes them the second most dangerous location in the port industry after quays. So these are the incidents that we noted. So there were 30 slip trips and falls from the same level. There were 4 slip trips and falls from less than 1 meter and 7 for greater. There were 23 incidents concerning lifting or manual handling, 12 where they were hit by flying or moving objects, 8 where they hit stationary objects, and 7 where they were actually caught between objects. So when you looked at this, we actually came to know there is a business case. There is a reason why we need to be looking at a business, ethical, and moral case. So what we did is we conceptualized a first national project on container lashing operations. And this occurred over 3 main stages. So the first stage was actually sitting down with the health and safety experts, your directors, and shortlisting the projects, just asking them, which are the areas we need to focus on? What are the goals of a sprint if we were to do it? And most importantly, with these projects, because they tend to grow legs very easily, what is the exclusion criteria? Which areas are we not looking at? So after the first meeting was done, we had a rough charter already in place for this. And I think the three main areas we are looking at is establishing what a common voice would be for industry. So basically the issue was that if one port would say that they're not gonna do the lashing operations for this ship, the ship would simply say that the other ports are doing it, why wouldn't you do it? And the ports would not have a counter to that. So creating a common voice will allow us to establish what is a common industry standard that we can have in place so that we don't actually face this in the future. Besides that, we were also looking at a couple of the higher hazard areas, which were manual handling and areas like that, and then stakeholder engagement. Once we finalized these areas, we then moved on to the second stage. So the second stage was actually holding a workshop in person. But once we have finalized it with the people from the top, we need to actually talk with the people from the sharp end. So the people who are actually doing the work day in and day out. So this meeting actually consisted of the stevedores, of the union reps, and also the safety people in the same room. And this kind of validated the issues that they were facing and what areas we needed to focus on. So after that meeting was completed, we actually managed to shortlist a couple of delivery projects to work on. And that brought us to stage 3. So once we had the delivery projects in hand, now it's simply a matter of resourcing and project planning these ones until they come to fruition. So like I said, we have 4 of them which were shortlisted. Out of the 4, we are ready to talk about the first project. The other 3 are we're still kind of working on them behind the scenes to resource them and get the approvals. But what we can talk about is establishing the common voice for industry. So this is what project number 1 is going to be. It's going to be a national safety lashing charter, and this is going to be upcoming in 2021. So what I can share with you right now is what a rough draft of the charter is going to look like. So over here, this is basically a very rough mock-up for what it would look like. It probably won't look like this once you've gone through the reiterations of it. So the first thing would actually be 3 sections for it. The first thing would be an understanding of the incidents that happen in the port industry. And the second would be inserting the modalities of work. So this would be basically what we would like to see to have a safe working environment, both from the shipping side and the port side as well. And the third section will simply be the ports which are going to sign up to this. So the graphics that you're seeing over there is actually taken from the PSS sector plan. So this one is actually going to be something similar to this, but this will also have the chief executive signatures of it. So this will help us establish a common voice for industry, a common standard for industry, which has never existed before. This is upcoming, so I expect, while we're still working on this behind the screen, you can expect an update within the next 1 or 2 months when you're ready to move forward on this. And we'd appreciate your support on this as well. The next thing, on the skills side, the National Occupation Standards for Port Operations has finally been reviewed and accepted. So it is updated and now finally ready for publishing. These national occupation standards affect the particular job roles over here, which are highlighted on screen: stevedoring, marine operative, passenger operative, etc. So since the standard has been, since they have been approved, you can continue on with these programs. The next update is regarding the annual industry accident statistics. As you all know, in June, we normally publish the accident statistics for the previous year. It is at the moment, it is in its final stages. I think it's reached draft number 4 or 5, but it's close to getting finished. It's normally released in June. That's just because of the time it takes to collect all the data and troubleshoot and make sure the data actually matches and they've sent in the data properly. So, like I said, you can expect a release probably later on this month. It's just under its final QA checks at the moment. So now moving on to the board members and the areas that they are championing and the updates in those areas. So the first area we're going to be looking at is people and skills. So the aim over here was to understand who are actually using the port qualifications. So we have created occupational standards, we have created Trailblazer apprenticeships, which have taken quite a large amount of time and energy to get done in be prepared for industry. So we just need to know now how many people are actually using it. Okay, the champions for this area are Martin Lawler and Dr. Alan Page. What has happened is we have done the first part, which is basically creating a survey and action planning. Now, once the survey is completed, the longer term plan is to actually develop a skill strategy for the sector, a short-term plan and a long-term plan. As an update, just after the last PSSG, we finalized the survey and have sent it out to all the members. Now, the purpose of the survey is twofold. We are trying to understand, for those people who are using the port qualifications, what y'all think are the benefits for it, why y'all using it. And for the people who are not using the port qualifications, we also want to know why you're not using it. Is it simply that it's not fit for purpose, or is it that there's just no awareness about it? But either way, we do want to hear back from you on how you're actually using the apprenticeship standards and the qualifications. So from our side, we have sent out the survey, and we've also sent out the chief executive letters asking them to take a look and respond to the survey. Quite frankly, the response to the member survey has been very poor. We have had, since the survey was launched, only 4 replies. That means only the Port of Blyth, Montrose, Port of Tyne, and DP World UK have actually responded to the survey. That means the rest of the membership has not yet given us feedback on this. Just 4 ports responding is not enough for us to create an evidence-based approach and develop a strategy for this. So if there's anyone on call who's able to follow up with their ports, please just mention it in the chat if you're willing to follow up with your organization, and we can get in touch with you on how to answer the survey. The survey only takes 20 minutes to answer. And the reason why we're doing this is basically because coming down the line, you have a lot of people that are retiring or leaving the port industry who have been here a very long time. So that's a lot of expertise that is leaving the industry. And a gap is being formed, which needs to be filled up by new people that are entering the industry. And these training standards are there not only to develop the technical qualifications, but we've designed the Trailblazer apprenticeships so that safety is built into the job description. They don't see safety as something external to the job. Doing the job safely is part of the job. So it's not that these people are just your technical leaders, but these people are going to be your future leaders for health and safety as well. And it's very important that we have these qualifications in place and everyone is following a standard, especially since we have spent that much of time developing these standards and Trailblazer apprenticeships. Amanda will talk a little bit more about it in her section. But once again, if any of you members are willing to follow up with the organizations, we can get in touch with you later. We just need 20 minutes of your time. And in exchange for that, we will develop the strategy for the sector in a short-term plan and a long-term plan. The next project we have to talk about is plant and equipment. So over here, the main aim is basically looking at where the injuries on plant and equipment are happening and identifying what are the top 3 priority areas we should be working on, and then creating a working group that would consist not only of the ports, but also manufacturers as well, so that we can actually manufacture out the risks. The champion for this area is Dave Maddison. Since our last meeting, we have actually held the first working group on the 25th of May. And this was basically, we just went over the accident stats and said that which are the areas we need to focus on? What are the top areas that would add value if we actually looked at them and control the risks here? I think they were caught in between objects, and then slip, trips, and falls from same levels, slip, trips, and falls from less than 1 meter, slip, trips, and falls over 1 meter. These tend to be the main priority areas. So now that that workshop is completed, the next step is the second workshop, which we focus on actual preventive actions for these priority areas. Then within process assurance, the champion for this area is Eddie. We have finished the first project on container lashings, in the sense that we already have the 4 projects we need to deliver and project manage. So now we can turn our attention to round 2 of the SIP impact survey. For those of you who don't know, a couple of years back, the HSC challenged us. They help us create the SIP documents. They just wanted to know, are people in the port industry actually using them? So SIP impact survey, the first round was actually that, to establish who are people actually using the SIP documents and to what extent. And then if we found best practice, we've also included that in the report and shared that with the rest of members. Now we are on to stage 2 of this, which is basically the second round of the same thing. At the start of last year, at the start of this year, I think it was, we did have a couple of volunteers that were willing to actually come and do this. Then COVID happened. So following up from this, we'll get in touch with you guys and see if you are still willing to participate in it, maybe this year or probably at the start of next year. With regards to marine operations, here the main strategy was to kind of focus on what are the 3 main areas we want to focus on as an industry. This is being championed by Peter Steen as well as Neil Glendenning. Now, since the last time we spoke, we have actually finalized the priority areas. So the 3 priority areas for PSS in this year will be weighted heaving lines, pilot ladders, and a contemporary health and safety issue, which we will be supporting MAIB on. Last year for MAIB, their focus was on self-mooring incidents, and PSS supported them by creating and updating our mooring guidance to include self-mooring guidance in it as well. So we'll continue to do that this year. MAIB is here to speak to you guys later on some of the lessons they have learned and some areas we need to focus on later in the day. The longer term strategy for the marine side is taking all this data that we've gathered around the marine side and applying it to our big data project. So we've got a big data project, which I'll talk about last, which is basically about using AI to understand live where our hotspot areas are for incidents and accidents. And the marine data, on the longer term, the marine data will feed into that data project. Coming to the big data project. So the champion for this area is Johnny Shute from RSSB, because they already have a system in place that looks at accidents and incidents in a proactive form and use AI to actually check out which of the hotspots and incidents would happen right now as we are speaking. So for PSS, we have 2 projects under this. The first one is updating our own standards, our own dashboards, our own annual accident stats. And the second one is a longer term project, which is what we are calling SMIS. So this is basically a precursor model for incidents and accidents. So this will be a system that uses data from the port industry and integrates it into a system that uses artificial intelligence to scan the data and understand where our risks are live at the moment. So it will be a live system that will be up and running. It's a longer term project. We're looking at least 3 years to get this up and running and off the ground. But what this will do is it will help the port industry to not be reactive about incidents, but will actually be proactive and looking at the future rather than looking at lagging indicators to see where the next incidents are going to happen. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation. We have covered the PSS strategy, where it's been since the last 5 years, and that it's due for a review this year as well. We talked about the joint notice on the dangerously weighted heaving lines, the fact that we've asked for 3 actions from everyone. It's just that we remind incoming ships about their duties under COSWAP, hand them the bulletin, and also inform them about the fines and prosecutions that could await them if they do continue with this unsafe practice. The link is inserted into the presentation, so you'll get the link directly with the joint signatures and the bulletins as well on the website. We also talked about the progress we've made on the container lashing operations project. We have finished the 3 stages of it, and now we have actually got the projects to actually deliver on. The first project is going to be the industry charter. Again, I showed you a copy of the draft, which we will finalize in the upcoming months and hopefully get that out before end of year. The port operations NOS, I've informed you, has been approved. Finally, the annual accident statistics will be coming out this month. Then we also talked about the PSS board members and which areas they are currently championing for the projects going forward in 2021. We've talked about the people and skills strategy. And we also talked about the survey, which we need your help to actually get some more responses in so that we can actually form a strategy based on that. We've also talked about the progress the plant and equipment group has made. We'll be looking forward to the workshop coming up. And under process assurance, excuse me, we'll be looking at continuing SIP impact too. So with marine operations, we just focused on what are the 3 main priority areas for PSS going forward. We also talked a bit about the big data projects. There will be some time for Q&A at the end of this session. If not, please feel free to drop us an email anytime you need something. All right. And with that, I come to the end of that. Thank you so much.
Rean. Thank you very much. I'll let you stop the screen share there. Thank you. Rean, that was really useful, and it's really interesting to see the work that's going on there within PSS, particularly to see the progress on that lashing strategy. And I had a note to ask you whether the slides would be available afterwards, but you've already answered that. So thank you for that. Just to say that I'm sorry to hear, and we're all sorry to hear that you're leaving, and we want to say thank you for the hard work that you've put in with PSS, and we wish you all the very best for your future, Rean. To make PSS the best that it can be, you can see the work that's going on in the background, but we need all port members to engage and help us to gather that information that we need in order to develop strategy and to provide things that are going to help health, safety and skills across all ports. And as Rean said, you know, we don't compete, we can compete commercially, but we don't compete with health and safety. So it's really vital that that to get the most from PSS membership, that you provide information as it's asked for in order to help us with the strategies, and particularly that that 20-minute survey on the vocational skills and apprenticeships. That's really useful. If you can fill that in, please, people. And I'm really looking forward to hearing a bit more about the Trailblazers with Amanda in the second session after the break. As Rean says, we work with so many maritime organisations, and as you are all aware, I'm sure, the SIP guidance is badged by the HSE, Unite and PSS, and that's a real bonus for us to have all of those parties working together on documents. And there's other input from other organisations for the other bits and pieces of work that are going on. And we are extremely grateful to the support that we have from Nicola Jaynes from the HSE, her ongoing input and support to us. So Nicola, if you're ready, I'd like to introduce you now to give your update from the HSE. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. I have, it's been a very different year actually, because obviously we haven't met face to face. We haven't had the same number of meetings, and with what's happened with Richard and with Rean leaving at the moment, the guidance group isn't meeting. So I'm looking forward to finding out who your new chair will be, which I'm sure everyone is. And it will be big shoes to fill, I'm sure, following in Richard and Rean's shoes. But I have got a very short presentation that I'll share, but I'm going to talk more than it probably, the slides. I'll have to press the right button. I've been stuck on Teams, and so it was quite exciting to come back to Zoom, but then I've forgotten how to do everything. Okay, I'm hoping I've screen shared this time. Jen's nodding. So
we can see that. Thank you.
I'm sure everyone knows where we are. I also forgot I don't have backgrounds on Zoom, so you get to see my really messy office. Before the pandemic, it was a junk room, so now it is just my life. I spend a long time in here. I'm sure we all do. So it's always good to talk to you. Sharon realised a few weeks ago that she hadn't asked me if I was free today, and fortunately I can do until 11. So really, I haven't got any massive updates from the point of view of HSE, because like I say, we haven't met, the guidance group hasn't met, so we haven't produced any new guidance. We have got guidance that's sitting there waiting, but we do need, I do need to sort of speak to Rean just to understand the current position before I can press go on any of that. Obviously, the last 18 months have been a challenge, and I think I said last time we met that, you know, as an industry, you've kept going, you've been amazing. and you've kept food on the tables and everything working. We're all looking forward to the 19th of July in some ways, but I'm sure we've also got trepidations coming with it. From a HSE point of view, all the guidance that is currently online for COVID will remain. The only difference will be is it will remove the references to social distancing. I say the 19th of July, we're all expecting it to happen. It could go either way, I suppose, but you're still going to need to do risk assessments. You're still going to need to understand the risk, and it's a new risk now that hopefully we've got a little more understanding of. Hygiene and ventilation and the importance of those is greatly increased. There has been an update in HSE's guidance on ventilation and using monitors in places where there's potential for poor ventilation. And obviously there's been leaps and bounds in the testing programs. Most people are probably doing twice weekly lateral flows. It's not foolproof, but at least it's something. And then obviously most adults now should have at least been able to have their first vaccination, and the vaccination program hopefully allows us to move forward to some form of normality, whatever that may be. I all think, you know, 18 months ago we were in a normal little world, and now we're living how we are. But I think it's just key to make sure you do keep assessing the risks, you do provide the right hygiene, and if you need to look at ventilation and changes, it's all great in the summer when we can all be outside. It's when we start to get to the cold winter weather. Although as Jen was saying earlier, that, you know, we're now in July, and the sun is shining here today, the first time this week, I'm not going to lie. And June, I think it rained nearly every day. Which, bear in mind, last year when we had some form of seasonal, I don't think it rained for about 2 months where I live. So yes, so COVID, still need to assess the risks. When I took over this role 3.5, maybe a bit more than that, 3.5 years ago, I was handed a project which was a freight container fumigation project. And it was HSE had spoken and been given information that there were issues with opening fumigated containers because they don't obviously always have the labels on them. I'd like to thank all the ports that helped us with this work. So our science division went out to a number of ports and watched the ports and what they did with border control, opening and containers that had come off of vessels. They looked at what system of work was in place. Now, when I've looked at the statistics, actually in the UK, we seem to manage this risk very well in ports, not so well necessarily in warehousing, which was the other section of this project. The work has now come to a close, and the aim of the work was to identify what is the risk of ports. I think what we did identify is that nobody does anything the same, but there's nothing wrong with that as long as you do something. But what was interesting is there was a huge number of fumigants identified that weren't labelled on the side of containers. So when we talked about what the possible outcomes of that would be, it's obviously impracticable to monitor all sorts of all the substances, because you can't monitor for everything. You'd be monitoring and opening containers and you'd be there. So we looked at how long it would take to clear a container by opening the doors, but we also looked at what needed to happen. And the biggest thing is a safe system of work is important. In the last 3 years, there has been 2 incidents in ports where people have gone into a container before it's been fully aired. Fortunately, no significant injury has been, you know, somebody's been able to rescue them, but it shows that it is a possibility. And obviously we know in the continent and around the world there have been fatalities from this. So any day now there'll be a link to the new research that I'll be able to share with the group. But what I would like to do is bring this to the table of the the port skills and the SIP documents to look at the fumigation and just check that what we've got in there is right. Because of the pandemic, obviously we've all had other priorities and things, and my biggest priority has been looking at driving for work. Now, you may say, why am I talking to you about driving for work? Because when you work on a port, you know you've got vehicles, you do your workplace transport and you look after your workplace transport. But I've been looking for driving for work and what that actually means. And driving for work at the moment is a guidance document called INDG 382. And it's a high-level management document that says that if you have anyone that drives for work, you should have a risk assessment and you should look at their journey, you should look at them, and you should look at the vehicle they're doing. But what we found is that if you have a fleet of lorries or HGVs, you are very clear that your drivers drive for work. But what we were finding is that actually a lot of companies don't understand that their staff that drive between sites, or their staff that drive around or drive to meetings and things like that, are driving for work. So what we've done is, after quite a bit of consultation with industry and other government departments, we're creating safe driving and riding for work pages. So riding is a new thing. We now have a lot of couriers that deliver. Just Eat and Uber have their work increased by 68% over the pandemic, unsurprisingly. But also there is new things now. I'm sure we've all seen e-scooters. We all have our own opinion of e-scooters, but they are being used for work. And also then there's the motorbike couriers. So it's safe driving and riding for work, where we'll be looking at and providing more guidance on what you should be looking for the safe journey. The safe journey isn't just about getting from A to B, it's trying to explain what is a commute and what isn't a commute. It also looks at whether you could do it at different times of the day, can you avoid peak flow of traffic, and things like that. So there's these new web pages. I have the launch set for early September. It was originally October, but there is a big project that the police are doing called Project Edward, about safe journeys and safe driving. I understand that one of the focuses of Project Edward will be load security of vehicles coming off of ports. I know they work with some ports already, but it's sort of a heads up really that is something that will be taking place. From Project Edward launches on the 13th of September, but there's some really big issues with workplace transport and big launches with some of the bigger companies at the beginning of September, which is why it's important that I think I probably covered everything on there of what they'll cover. We have looked massively at the differences on things like the gig economy, because that's something I think 2 years ago most of us knew what it meant, but it didn't really matter to our businesses. One of the biggest things has been the rulings, the High Court judgments on what is an employer. I don't think it affects many ports as such, but the term HSE is moving away from is employer to looking at workers. So what rights do your workers have? And that's me. Didn't think I was going to fill half an hour.
Thank you.
Actually, I will say one more thing. My time in sector it should have been up in December last year. And so every month that I don't get told I'm moving back to the field is another month that I get to continue the work I'm doing. I have been promised that they won't move me without providing me some time to hand over, because of the work I do, not just with yourselves, but with other industry. But yes, it does seem like a lot of change at once if I do go, and then Richard and Rean as well. So that could be a huge amount of change for you guys. But I have enjoyed, if I don't get the opportunity to speak at your next meeting, which will be in 6 months' time or whatever, it has been a pleasure working with you all.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jen.
No, thank you very much. And yes, we realise we're on borrowed time, but we're very grateful for it, certainly. Yes, it'll be good to see that container fumigation work when it comes through, and the safe driving, again, as you say, is kind of much wider than just ports, but very relevant to us, isn't it? So
yeah.
Thank you for the update. Robert, I'm going to ask you now, breaks. Do you want to just advise people now on how we'll arrange the breaks now until we go into the next session?
Yeah, we have a short Q&A just before we finish this session. Then we have a break, and then we start the next. And we have a couple of questions for Nicola and Rean. And but if anyone has any more, please keep them coming. The first one is about the lashing standards. And the question is, the lashing standard is a really important initiative. What's the plan for engagement with the ship owners and charterers so that they can get the industry voice and communicate that to individual vessels?
Yes, this is excellent. So we are still at the starting stages. So we just need to get a straw man in place before we start engaging even with the entire industry, maybe even regulators as well. As soon as we have a straw man in place, we're ready to start talking with not only the port industry, but also the stakeholders around. We want as many people involved in the drafting process as it can be, and as many people signing up as we can. And we're looking for it to not only be national, we're also trying to make it an international charter at some stage. So if any of you guys want to actually get involved with it, just drop me a line, and we're just waiting to get a draft up and running so that we can start actually engaging with as many people as possible. But we'd be more than happy to have anyone come in.
Okay. There's another, it's more of an observation than a question, I suppose, but why does it take so long to get the stats from the members? And is there a plan or possibly a charter to get them in quicker?
Well, this actually is one of the jobs that does take the largest amount of time. It's just because it's a combination of the document is quite large as well, so it's very technical and very specific. Having the people access all the data they need from the organization sometimes takes time, and then we're also talking of a collection of almost 100 organizations. So sometimes the data will come in and it might be wrong on one page that we won't find out until a couple of months later. So it's just a very tedious process. There's a lot of QA checking at each level. It's the amount of data that's collected. It's from the organizations it's collected, and then it's also QA checking it once it comes back to us. So this process kind of does take. It's just a very long grinding phase. There was a suggestion to bring out different versions of the annual stats based on how many people send it in. But the problem of that would be we'd have maybe 4 or 5 versions of annual stats floating out in a year based on as people keep sending in the data. So that's why we just wait for us to get all the data in and then QA check it as well again. So it's not one reason, it's a combination of a bunch of different reasons. We're hoping once the big data project gets up and running, we can somehow use technology to get the data in faster and make it easier. But those are the issues we're facing as a trade body to get in the data. That's why it usually takes at least 6 months to complete the process.
Sure. I guess this question's on a similar point, but it goes more towards qualifications. It's obviously disappointing that there's been a poor response to the qualifications survey, but I appreciate these days with heavy email traffic, requests to participate in surveys that require a bit of time can easily get bypassed. Would a different method or a further promotion help to achieve a greater response? I guess you sort of answered that, but just with from a different standpoint.
Yes, if there's a more effective method that we can use, we'll definitely want to hear about it. If there's any easier way you think that we can get in touch with you guys, definitely drop it in the comments. We're more than willing to listen to feedback of how to change and how to work better. At the moment, we do send it electronically, and then we do follow it up with a snail mail letter as well. So it's actually addressed to your chief exec as well, asking. So at the moment, it's a couple of different layers that go into it, but I think it's just a whole lot of work that ports are facing, and it kind of gets lost after a certain amount of time. It just needs a lot of follow-ups. But if you feel that if you feel there would be a better way to engage with you, please, by all means, do send a feedback into us. We're more than happy to try out new methods.
That's it for the questions for the moment, Jen. We've grabbed a little bit of time back. We're going to all turn our screens off now, but and so on Swapcard, the screen will go blank. We're going to start the second session at 11:10, where we have, there's a little sort of, we might have to jig the program around a bit, but update from the MAIB and the Trailblazer apprenticeship. So you have time to go and have a cup of coffee or whatever. We're going to be back at 11:10. And again, there'll be a chance for you to ask questions of the panelists. In the meantime, you can use Swapcard to network with other participants, and we'll see you in 20 minutes. And if I just remind all the speakers, if you just stop your video, then the screens go blank. Yep.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your coffee and your chocolate biscuits or whatever your tipple is. I'd like to introduce David Brown, our chair of PSS, who's got a brief words to say to us now. Thanks, David.
Jen, thank you. Always never good to start with an apology, but I apologise, didn't quite make the morning, but we've just had an incident on the dock, which just, I suppose, brings the whole port skills and safety into very vivid highlight, really. But anyway, what I'd like, as always, to do is just start with a thank you to all the members who I can't see, but hopefully can feel, that are listening and logged in this morning, because it is only with your support that PSS can continue to be a success. And I'll return to that bit at the moment. I just caught a couple of Rean's slides before I had to disappear. But obviously, the one question that will probably be on most people's minds is the appointment of new chief exec. I can't release the name quite yet. I was hoping to be able to do it this morning, but there's just a little bit more process I need to go to. But the name will be very much out on the wires by tomorrow. And I think I just want to assure you that we've been through a very thorough process. And in the new chief exec, I believe we're going to find someone that will continue to drive us to the next level, a real sort of campaign based approach to all the things that we want to do. And also it's a very useful junction to be able to formally, on behalf of all of you members, to thank the amazing work that Richard Steele did for all of us when he was in as the chief exec, and we had an opportunity a couple of weeks ago to thank him as part of our main board, but I know you'd all join me as members to thank the work that Richard has done. But with a change in personality becomes a change and an opportunity, and obviously also a chance to say thank you to both Rean, although he will be around for a bit longer, and Marcia for the work they've done. But they're moving on to their next challenges, and obviously that gives us a further opportunity to find new officers for port skills and safety, that the chief exec will be able to build a new team. And again, I'll be very much leaning on all you as members to make sure that your voices are heard, and again, all the initiatives that they've been so good in driving forward actually reality. I think just a couple of things, and again, I don't want to repeat what others have said, but I know Rean touched on the lashing. To me, the lashing is a very exciting bit of progress here for two reasons. One is it goes to heart of two of our core strategic themes, that of communication and self-regulation. And Eddie Scroggins, who kindly hosted the workshop about 3 weeks ago, had some really, really good input. And as always, I have to say, the good ideas come from the mess room, not from the boardroom. And what we're going to do in that, as Rean would have explained, is to get a charter for the shipping lines, also a charter for the ports, and then look at a vessel conditioning report. There's some really things that we haven't done before, which will require obviously leadership and will also require involvement for everything. So it's a work in progress, but again, I'll just urge you to engage on that, because the stats are pretty horrendous in terms of what's been happening on lashing, and I know that we can get better. The second bit is on data, and again, I don't want to sort of bore a conference on people sort of banging on about data, but we're beginning to make some quite exciting progress on that front, and this is a case of the sum being greater than the parts. So at Bristol, we are doing a small AI study, and it's beginning to throw up some really quite interesting associations in terms of a correlation between the weather, correlation between age, correlation between certain activities. And what I hope at the port skills and safety level is we can do some thinking so that we can capture a load of data that's out there from all the members on here. And then if we can get that data and then synthesize it, we can put it into a model that will be predictive. And hopefully help every member, hence my point about the sum being greater than the parts. And again, I will return to that at our next session and give some more detail. And I think the final bit, obviously it's Maritime Safety Week, and I actually lobbied a little bit, maybe too late, is to get the word skills included. So it's a bit of a cliche, you may have heard it before, but I think we've been good at shouting safety. We haven't been quite so good at shouting skills, and they're absolutely symbiotic relationship. And I think my experience down at Bristol is we've had some really interesting cases, especially on this data project, where someone within the company who I'd never thought had a particular appetite for data and data exploitation suddenly stepped up to the plate, and we are now reskilling him so that he can be an expert on the data. So in terms of he can then take that knowledge and then feed it back onto the key wall, the rest of it. So I think there's a whole bit on skills, and I'll just urge everyone to think holistically. Yes, in terms of skills for the key side, but also skills for other parts of the business that are key. And again, you may have heard the Chancellor this morning talking about the various initiatives there. So probably I've already gone on for a little bit too long, but just in summary, it's a huge thank you for Richard, Rean and Marcia for everything they've done. We have got a new team. Obviously, there will just be a little temporary pause whilst we get them in place. And I'm very excited about the new chief exec we've chosen, and I know you in turn will want to meet that person and get the relationship, and again get all your ideas in front of that person so that they can take and lead up the organisation from where Richard's left it off. And secondly, which is allied, is just that point of engagement, so that everyone feels that it is your organisation. We can't survive without members, and the more you put in, the more you get out. And again, I know Jen and others have talked about that. So if there is a facility to take any questions, I'm very happy to do it. But again, just thank you to Robert for setting this all up. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you all in person in 3 or 4 months' time when this wretched virus has gone out. And for any English supporter on the webinar today, hopefully we'll also be celebrating further on Sunday. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much, David. Robert, are there any questions that have popped up on the Q&A?
None at the moment. No.
Okay, great. Thank you. David, thank you very much for coming on, particularly when having such a busy day. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. We've got a video now from the Maritime Minister, Right Honourable Robert Ports MP. Rob, are you okay to show that now, please? I'm not sure whether we can see the video. And we just need some sound shared on that. I think we just need to get the sound through on the Zoom portal. So we'll just give Rob a second to see if we can get that to work.
It's not working at the moment, so apologies.
Problem. Shall we give you a chance to have a look at that? Andrew, are you okay if we move on to your presentation now?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that.
That's great, thank you. I'd like to introduce Andrew Moll, who is the Chief Inspector for the MAIB. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much indeed. So I'll just try and get my screen shared up with you. Let's hope that that's going to work. And Jen, can you just confirm that my slideshow is up?
Yes, we can see that, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for inviting me along to talk to the Sports Skills and Safety seminar this week, which has been pointed out is also Maritime Safety Week. So lots going on and lots of new content appearing in all sorts of places. So compared to some of the more exciting videos, hopefully this is not going to be too dull. Before I go into some of the accidents, and I will talk about some of the stuff that we're looking at, just a very quick primer on the MEIB for those of you who aren't familiar with us. Set up in 1989 following the Herald of Free Enterprise disaster 2 years earlier, in which nearly 200 people were killed. Lord Justice Sheen recommended at that stage separating the accident investigators from the regulators. He thought it was inappropriate that following an accident, the regulators should be marking their own homework, and that accident investigation with the aim of preventing further accidents should be separated out. So that's what happened in the UK, and the country set up the Marine Accident Investigation Branch, as I say, 2 years later, 1989. Our fundamental purpose, investigate accidents to determine the circumstances and causes with the aim of improving the safety of life at sea and the avoidance of accidents in the future. It is not our purpose to apportion liability, nor, except so far as necessary, to achieve a fundamental purpose to apportion blame. Sometimes when you're telling the story, blame does come out. It's something sometimes unavoidable if you're telling an accurate story, but it is not our intention to apportion blame, and nor should our reports be used in court for any judicial purpose that apportions blame. So our focus is purely on improving future safety. The MEIB sits alongside our two sister branches, the Rail Accident Investigation Branch, invented in 2005 following some fairly tragic large train crashes around the turn of the century, and the Air Accidents Investigation Branch, which have been around really since the Wright brothers first practiced plummeting over a century ago. As you can see from this graphic, we all report directly to the Secretary of State, and we, in our case, MEIB, we are separate from the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, that regulator I was talking about a moment ago. So our aims, first off, obviously improve the safety of life at sea. Secondly, to satisfy the public in general, the marine community in particular, that marine accidents are being properly investigated. And thirdly, to fulfill the UK's international obligations to investigate marine accidents. So although we were set up in 1989 following the Herald of Free Enterprise disaster, the rest of the world has caught on, and this is no longer a discretionary activity for us. Back in 2010, the International Maritime Organization, which had for a long time recommended that states investigate marine accidents, made it mandatory for us to investigate all very serious marine casualties involving convention vessels. So those are basically greater than 500 gross tons internationally trading. And a very serious marine casualty is a loss of a vessel, a death as a result of the accident, or serious marine pollution. So quite a lot of our work is outcome driven. It is non-discretionary, and we have to do it. And I'll just talk a bit more in a moment about what we actually do. And very finally, on sort of the internal organograms, that's a picture of the organisation, me sitting at the top there in yellow, with a deputy chief inspector working with me, very much driving the investigations. And we have four teams of 3/4, and they're on duty a week at a time. White team happens to be on call this week. The guys are all in the office, and they're at 2 hours' notice to move anywhere in the world, wherever a marine accident may occur. Bags packed, arms full of inoculations, passports stamped up, and so on. So what do we investigate? Well, UK flagged vessels anywhere in the world, any country's vessels inside UK waters, which is inside the 12-mile limit. So that's merchant ships of all sizes, fishing vessels. I've got leisure craft in red there. There's no obligation for leisure craft operators to report their accidents to the MEIB, but we do investigate some. And occupational accidents, which is what we'll come on to in a moment, accidents to people. We put about 1,200 cases a year on our database. That's quite a good number, and we conduct around 30 full investigations a year, which result in publicly available reports. This is the sort of stuff that keeps us awake. The sea has the potential to kill on an industrial scale. Herald of Free Enterprise, 188 fatalities. Estonia in 1994. 850 people out of the 989 people on board lost their life. And those of you following the press will see that out in the Baltic states are looking to reopen that investigation with the possibility of an ROV survey this year. And if that throws something up, there may be even a full intervention next year. Al Salam Boccaccio, 98, 2006, over 1,000 people died. And I think, and it sounds an odd thing to say, but it was amazing that there were only 32 casualties in the Costa Concordia disaster. So that's the stuff that keeps us awake. What are we doing at the moment? Well, actually, MAIB's got 27 full investigations ongoing. 14 of those investigations involve fatalities of a total of 17 people. So back to my point, we are to a large extent outcome driven. A lot of those fatalities are drowning. So if you go in the water, we're very, very focused on drowning, and unfortunately, commercial fishing makes up around about a third of what we're doing. So that's the sort of primer on the MAIB, and I'm moving quickly on to I've got 3 topic areas really to talk about today. And I'm guessing that these will have come up. I'm afraid I didn't have time to dial into the morning session, so apologies if I'm saying stuff that you already know. So the first one, well, weighted heaving lines. Lots of focus on this through ports and harbours, port skills and safety, and so on. Just generally around the area, people are beginning to focus on weighted heaving lines. MAIB, only 9 reports so far this year, which is probably surprisingly low given the anecdotal reporting of these accidents, but they probably need to cross the threshold before people are telling us about them. Tugs are the main recipients of these weighted heaving lines. Fortunately, this year, I don't have any reports of anyone being injured or struck by a weighted heaving line, but we do have one report of a metal hook being thrown ashore. So that would have been a shoreside rigger or stevedore, presumably waiting to pick up a mooring line, who had a metal hook thrown at him. And the heaviest weight that I've had reported this year is 1.3 kilograms. So quite a hefty piece of kit to be hurling around. MAIB is interested in reports of weighted heaving lines. It builds a database, going back to David's point about that sort of the whole is more than the sum of the parts. The more data we get, the more we can build a picture of what's going on and say something more about it. But I think the message needs to get through. The focus is there, but I'm not sure that the message is landing to the extent that it would need to at the moment. Second issue is mobile phones. I was doing a quick internet search this morning, and I came up with a figure of over 5 billion people on the planet have mobile phones. They are pretty much everywhere. Everyone has one. The second thing about mobile phones is that they are an instant source of entertainment and diversion. As I was walking into the office this morning, I had to step into the road to avoid a youngster heading to school who was completely eyes down in his mobile phone, and he was keeping station on a friend. They were walking together down the path, but he had absolutely no awareness whatsoever of what was going on around him. And I think on a daily basis, I can talk about near misses, people crossing roads, car drivers texting whilst they're driving, and so on. It is part of our lives. The temptation to self-distract with a mobile phone is stronger than the Jedi Force, and I think we all collectively need to wake up to that. So a couple of cases to talk about. From the MAIB's perspective, mobile phones have had an impact on ship navigation. So this is a report that we did, published in 2019, grounding of the motor vessel Priscilla on the Pentland Skerries. And the story is a reasonably straightforward one. You can see a graphic there of the electronic chart system, and at the top of the screen is a dotted line, which was the ship's intended track going from east to west through the Pentland Firth. And the watchkeeper has come on watch, and the ship is an autopilot, and has decided to self-distract on the mobile phone. And you can see in the middle of the screen this black wavy line heading towards the Pentland Skerries. And at some point, we believe the watchkeeper intended to go through between the two islands to the left, but hadn't focused on the detail on the chart and hadn't realised it was unsafe to do so. And a few VHF radio calls later, he eventually woke up to the fact right at the last moment that the ship was standing into danger. Unfortunately, despite the guidance that there were hazards to the north, he turned the ship to the north and it grounded. But that is just one of a number of cases that we are now seeing where collisions or groundings are occurring because people are self-distracting with the mobile phone when they should be paying attention out of the window. And this is another interesting one, which is now quite well publicised. So this happened almost exactly a year ago. A 300-metre tanker grounded on the reefs off Mauritius, and about 1,000 tonnes of fuel oil entered the lagoon before the pollution could be stopped. And the master admitted that he had diverted the ship from its navigation track close inshore to Mauritius in order for the crew to be able to pick up a mobile phone signal so they could WhatsApp their relatives and so on. And I believe the court cases and so on for this are still ongoing, but mobile phones. So bringing this really back to the focus for this group, and I hope many of you will have seen a report that we published last year involving a vessel called Sea Truck Progress. Death of a third officer struck by a freight vehicle on the stern ramp of the Ro-Ro freight vessel Sea Truck Progress. Not the only accident. There are lots of these going on. 5th of August 19, a chief officer was fatally injured when struck by a semi-trailer being pushed on board a Ro-Ro ferry in Rotterdam. That accident's being investigated by the Netherlands Ministry of Social Affairs and Employment. 21st of January 2020, shore rigger killed on Norski in Tilbury, and that's being investigated by HSE. So the investigation authorities, sometimes shoreside, sometimes wetside, it depends a bit on who was killed and the circumstances of the accident. But in this case, third officer standing on the stern ramp using his mobile phone. A tractor unit being driven by a shore worker pushing a semi-trailer ashore from the lower hold, so having to go up the ramp onto the main deck and then off the ship shore ramp across the link span, for want of a better phrase. He couldn't see the other side of the semi-trailer he was pushing, and the third officer standing smack in the middle of the ramp, back to the traffic, completely immersed in his phone conversation. Safety issues, well, the vehicles and pedestrians on the ramps at the same time, visibility from the tractor units, use of the banksman, and mobile phone distraction. We made a couple of recommendations in that report. The first one to the MCA, UK Maritime Coast Guard Agency, to the Isle of Man Ship Registry to issue guidance on the potential distractions caused by the use of mobile phones on working decks and other workspaces on board ships, and also to the MCA to incorporate guidance in their code of safe working practices for merchant seafarers. So we were very much focusing on the marine community, but hoping that would bleed across, and that there is a plethora of guidance out there about mobile phones and mobile phone distraction. My sense is that the message is only partly getting through, and it would be too simplistic to say it's an age thing, because it's not. My wife is completely besotted with her mobile phone, and it only needs to ping and she diverts her attention to it. So it is not just about age, but there's no doubt that some people completely understand the seductive nature of phones, and they isolate themselves from them, they turn them off, they put them away, they put them to silent or whatever, and others have yet to get that message. So I think that's one we're just going to have to keep banging the drum on, but there's no doubt about it. We're going to see more accidents, I'm afraid, before the penny drops. I'm going to just move on quickly to my final topic, and that is the interface between shoreside workers and ship's crews during cargo operations. And this particular case, another MAIB report. Fatal crush injuries to a second officer caused by a mobile gantry crane. So for those of you not familiar with gantry cranes, this is a picture looking down at the deck of Carina Sea. What you have is a number of hatch covers, and you can see them all here piled up in the middle of the ship. And a gantry crane shown in yellow at the top right-hand corner, which lifts these hatch covers and moves them around. It either places them back in position, which would be the next thing to happen here, or when the vessel is coming to unload, it stacks them all up so that the cranes, the grabs, or whatever can load or discharge cargo. Important points, the drivers from these cranes are usually positioned on the top of them, which is fine if they're not carrying a hatch cover, but when they are lifting a hatch cover and moving it, then that their visibility down and around the deck is really quite constrained. The other thing really is that they, with all the noise that's going on in the ports, although these things are quite noisy, they actually creep up on you quite quietly. And in our Carina Sea accident, a second officer had gone along the deck, and he was trying to use a hatch cover to move from one side of the vessel to the other, and he misjudged his timing and was caught by a moving gantry crane that crushed in between the crane and the stack of hatch covers there. There were other factors in play, fatigue, alcohol, etc. But there are some specific issues that pertain here. Poor downward visibility from the crane driver's position. I've mentioned that. The fact that there was no banksman or supervisor. We have a lot of lifting accidents on our books, and I wouldn't want to put a percentage on it, but the number of times the lifting accident has occurred and there has not been a banksman, supervisor, or supervisory number there is amazing. Most lifting operations require a banksman, and I think you dispense with a banksman at your peril. Lack of warning from the movement of the crane. I've mentioned that. There was a klaxon on it. It only sounded when the crane was moving, so there was no advance notice that the crane was going to move, and unfortunately it was inaudible over the ambient noise around the dockside of everything that was going on. There's a flashing light on the crane, but of course that's only useful if you're looking at it. And finally, the emergency stop buttons were they were there, but they were pretty inaccessible for someone who might be in harm's way. That they were easily accessible if you weren't in harm's way, but not if you were. And unfortunately, we're investigating another one. So this involves Cimbris, and this was a crush fatality to a stevedore rather than a member of ship's crew. So we've got stevedores in the hold, obviously crane drivers ashore discharging cargo, ship staff moving hatch covers backwards and forwards to facilitate that operation, and a stevedore foreman who is moving backwards and forwards ends up looking over the edge of the hatch combing, we think to communicate to the guys in the hold below, and a gantry crane rumbles along and crushes him. So very many of the same issues that we've already talked about. David said that communication was a strong theme, and I would absolutely echo that. That there's no doubt in my mind that really good communication between ship's crew and shoreside workers when they are engaged on the same task, and absolutely not dispensing with supervisors, banksmen, those safety numbers that you need to have that sort of bird's eye view of what is going on are absolutely essential. So with that, I think I will stop. I don't know whether that has triggered some thoughts, and Jen, whether you want to move back to the to the video, or want people to throw some brickbats at me with questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That's really interesting presentation, and lots of detail in there. Very to know that 5 billion people have mobile phones, and as you say, that feeling to self-distract is really it can be overwhelming, can't it? And there's a balance, I think, isn't there, but whereby phones are actually a useful tool, and it's how you balance that usefulness that the phone can provide along with preventing that sort of self-sabotage, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And just to reiterate the piece that you said at the end about the communications and the fact that as ports we have shoreside staff who are accessing vessels, not necessarily fully aware of what else is going on, or the ship's crew not being fully aware of them being there is the risk that we really must focus on with communication. So thank you very much for that. I think if we give people a chance to maybe type some questions into the Q&A and take them later, Rob would like to have another go at that video. So you're up, Rob. Let's see if we can see the screen share with the sound this time.
Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this event. I'm sorry not to be with you today, but I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you all during Maritime Safety Week. And let me start by reminding everyone how crucial ports are to the UK. 95% of our country's trade passes through our ports. And over the last 15 months, you have gone above and beyond to keep this vital trade flowing. No matter what your role, everyone in the sector, from those managing major ports, providing services, or in the supply chain, have stepped up without exception. I have been so impressed with how you as a sector have responded. You've risen to the unprecedented challenges brought on by the pandemic magnificently. And I want to take this opportunity to say a heartfelt thank you on behalf of the nation for everything you have and continue to do. Now, safety has played an even more central role in the sector's operations during this period. It must always top the list of considerations, and it is the vital foundation that underpins success. And as we look forward to our recovery from the pandemic, we must reaffirm once again our commitment to safety. Port skills and safety play a crucial role in assisting the sector to understand the challenges and meet them head on. And despite the challenges that have been brought about by the pandemic, you have nevertheless been able to make great strides towards further improvements in safety. I note the recent introduction of your safety culture model and provision of online courses as particular highlights. These will be the lasting legacy of Richard Steele, who many of you will know personally. He has been the mainstay of port skills and safety for many years and has steered the organisation to ever greater heights. His loss will be felt keenly, but I wish him well in his new role, where he will continue to be a strong advocate for safety. Port Skills and Safety's annual accident report is an excellent example of the way the organisation has evolved under Richard's leadership. It's an insightful resource, providing the evidence to allow us to see where accidents are taking place and learning from them to prevent reoccurrence. I was deeply saddened that in 2020, 2 people lost their lives in workplace accidents at ports. Any loss is a human tragedy for the family, friends and colleagues of those individuals, and one life lost is one too many. But by working together in partnership, we can make the sector a safer place, sharing lessons learned and best practice. The webinar presentations running today will help to share this best practice and drive improvement and safety in the sector. And this is one of the key aims of Maritime Safety Week. The Maritime Accident Investigation Branch needs no introduction. They will be presenting today on the tragic accident which saw 9 people sustain very serious injuries and cost the life of a young person in August last year. The work of MAIB comes at the other end of the spectrum. Their world-class investigations ensure that when an accident does occur, its causes are uncovered, and their recommendations prevent reoccurrence. They help the sector to learn from these incidents, implement safer ways of working, and ultimately make the UK a more attractive place to operate. Now, Maritime Safety Week was introduced in 2018 to facilitate the sharing of knowledge, experience, and best practice, but also to highlight the excellent safety work that happens across the maritime sector on a day-to-day basis to prevent accidents from occurring in the first place. I believe that this year, it's more important than ever that we use Maritime Safety Week to shine a spotlight on the fantastic work this sector does in this space. It's largely hidden from view, but those who perform vital safety roles are seldom in the limelight, and frequently they don't receive the acknowledgement that they so richly deserve. But their successes should be and will be recognised. So please, take a moment to recognise your fantastic work over the last year and celebrate your achievements. Now, as you continue with your day, I'd encourage you to use the hashtags Maritime Safety Week and Maritime Safety Matters to promote key maritime safety messages. I really hope that we can work together to prevent accidents, to save lives, and to continue to deliver improvements in maritime safety performance. Through working together, we can maintain the UK's position as a world leader in safety on and around the water. Thank you once again for inviting me along today. I hope you enjoy this opportunity to understand more about what is being done. And let's apply the lessons learned in your sectors to improve safety for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rob. Yes, I think I'd just like to echo that really. I think this, the fact that the organisations, our port organisations have stepped up during the pandemic, and that we should pass on the thanks that the Minister had in that video to all of our employees. And we as an organisation at Port of Tyne have been talking, this focus that we all have of tackling challenges head on, and we tend to be, all of us can do organisations, don't we? We have people who are very good at problem solving and dealing with things. And we've been talking about sort of taking and giving credit for the achievements that we've made, and to be making a focus on the sort of leading and the positive performance indicators, not just not just to record the injuries, which are and other incidents, which of course are really important, but it's also important to see where we've come from and look forward with those positive achievements too. If you do have any questions or any comments, please do continue to put them into the Q&A box. We're going to move on now to Amanda's presentation. So Amanda Viljoen is the Group Marine Training and Apprentice Programs Manager, ABP. Thank you for joining us, Amanda. I'll let you provide your presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. I'll just share the screen. Hopefully that's coming up. Great. So let's try and move on. So firstly, thank you for having me again on the PSS Group meetings. It's always great to be here and to support PSS. I've been asked just to give a little bit of an overview of Trailblazers and how ABP utilizes some of those. So most people already know who Associated British Ports are, but you'll see why the slide comes in a few minutes. We have ports across all regions, so across England, Scotland and Wales. We do have activities which cross just not ports, but terminals, dredging, as well as consultancy. And this leads us to always assist our customers in their future needs. So when I said about having ports in Wales and Scotland and in England, it really leads me on to the levy. So the levy is a government initiative whereby businesses which had a payroll of more than £3 million would pay up to 0.5 of their payroll bill into what was called a digital account. And this levy could be used for Trailblazers, which are apprenticeships, but it's only used in England. So for us, we have got obviously Wales and Scotland, which we need to look after at the same time. But the English Trailblazers have been built by industry for industry. And it doesn't matter if you're not levy paying, because you can still use those Trailblazers. You just need to contribute 5% and the government pays the other 95% of the training. And the way in which we've managed to use our Trailblazers so far is mainly since 2017 in engineering. So I think engineering is quite a traditional apprenticeship. And if you look at all businesses, engineering has been accepted as an apprenticeship since we all were growing up as children. We knew about engineering apprenticeships. But it's the other sectors that we maybe have missed out on. And when the levy came out in 2017, I worked with PSS as a chair for 4 Trailblazers, which was specific to the ports industry. And I worked with quite a few of yourselves that are probably on this call now. And we built 4 programs which would support our industry within the ports. So with marine operations, pilot apprenticeships, and port operations. Those, as you can see on the graph, we've started to use in earnest. But what we found is there's hundreds of apprenticeships now that are able to be used for our own industry. Ports aren't only about the engineering sector or the marine sector. We are almost our own little cities. We have our financial departments. We have our procurement departments. So we've started to look at Trailblazers in a bigger light. And we looked at workforce planning. What is the talent we're going to need for the future? And from this, we've opened up our provision of Trailblazers to another 8 different types, which we are going to look to build on even more in the future. But we are now looking at commercial apprenticeships, credit control and financing, planning, and just going back to a little bit about what David said, master data. So data, we don't have a lot of data analysis, but that is also the way the future's going. And there's apprenticeships to help upskill or new starters could go into. So that's just a little bit of how we're using our apprenticeships since 2017. What's helping this year in particular with the Trailblazers is the government's incentives. So the government has put out incentives that are available to all users of apprenticeship programs for new starters. And you can gain £3,000 for every new starter you bring into the business between the 1st of April and the 30th of September. Now, that's a great way to kickstart your programs. But if you're not quite ready for apprenticeships, there are other incentives with regards to traineeships as well, where you can get £1,000. So all of this is really there to try and kickstart apprenticeships in 2021, because during 2020, there was an obvious dip in the uptake of apprenticeships across the country. So the other part that we've started looking at with Trailblazers is using them for upskilling. So there's quite a grand job being done with respect to new starters. We've got the motivation to bring in new starters, to create the new pipelines with the Trailblazers. But what about the existing staff? There's a misconception that apprenticeships are only for new starters or for young school children coming into the business. Trailblazers are now being built from level 1 all the way through to level 7, which is masters. There are Trailblazers which have integrated degrees, for example, and these can be used to upskill or even reskill current staff. Within our business, we did start looking at this in 2017. We started to dabble with it with 2. Then in 2018, we really took hold of it. And then we came back to the table and said, right, some things aren't quite working with upskilling for us. And I'll explain that in a minute. So we pared it back and we looked a bit more strategically what we needed to do with it. 2019, we started to rebuild it. 2020, obviously, there wasn't much chance to rebuild on that. And now for 2021, we are starting to look at rebuilding that upskilling program. For 2021, we're looking at programs like the SHE technician, so the health and safety technician. So we all have safety representatives. They're all trained to a certain point, but the apprenticeship could actually enhance that training, give them even more skills to tackle the safety cultures where it's needed, or help to investigate. We're also looking at upskilling within our procurement departments, for example. As I mentioned, we did stumble a little bit with the upskilling. And the trap we fell into was 20% off the job and the misunderstandings that go with it. Now, if you're starting a new Trailblazer apprenticeship and a brand new starter comes into the business, we all accept that they're going to be off the job for their training, that they're going to need time away to study. But when you've got people in your business who are operational, they're on shifts, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And it was getting to understand, what does this 20% off the job really mean? So the Institute for Apprenticeship has got some really good guides, and they've even got one around myths about 20% off the job. At the bottom of the slide, there is a link, and the slides will be shared later, where you can go to the slides and have a look at what these myths are. But I think this is probably the clearest picture that helps to understand that 20% of the job that is a requirement of a trailblazer. And really it is the training or the learning directly relevant to the apprenticeship? And if it is, then it's 20% off the job. Are they learning a new skill? Then it's 20% of the job. And is that learning taking place within the normal working hours? So it doesn't matter if the person is on shift. If they're learning something new at midnight, they are effectively gaining their 20% off the job. So those are just a few key facts around the 20% of the job, and the fact that if you strategically look at how you can utilize that 20%, it does make it easier, and you can use the apprenticeship programs to upskill or reskill staff. I didn't want to go on about benefits that we saw for the apprenticeships, because I think it's quite obvious from the fact that we do use them, that we find huge benefits in having a talent pipeline of the future, or to upskill our current staff or reskill them. So I looked at what was out there. And in 2021, in January this year, Open University surveyed over 600 employees. And I thought these were quite key to some of the aspects that we're looking at as an organization. 60% or 66% of other organizations actually reported that apprenticeships have helped their organizations to bounce back from the economic fallout from 2020. 80% of all business surveyed stated that the learn and earn opportunities make the organization more agile. Young people have really taken to the idea of coming into apprenticeships, and instead of going off to university and getting into debt. And with the fact that there is the ability to have degree apprenticeships now, they're doing the same degrees through an apprenticeship as they would if they'd just gone to university. So it is definitely becoming a more way of the future to learn. 74% of organizations actually reported a boost in retention. And I can honestly vouch for that, because we've seen apprentices start off straight out of school. They've spent their time with us, and we're starting to see them actually progress through the business. They're now becoming the next supervisors 5 years on from when they started. So it does show that they're wanting to stay with you, they're wanting to progress with you, and they have the future plans with the organization. 78% reported a transformation impact on the organization. These young people do come into the business with big ideas, and some of those ideas are really worthwhile listening to. Apprenticeships also bring in new and diverse talent. When you go out to market and you start your assessment process for apprentices, there are so many young people there looking for these roles. And again, this comes from the same survey, but 74% of employees who hired apprentices have said that they are the social engine of mobility, that they are the future of employment. So apprentices also enabled the organization to build the future from within. Nearly 3/4 of employees have stated to hire candidates without degrees or lower education attainment in order to build them up. By bringing in young people, you're building on your own culture within your own industry. Of these, 76 did so with a widening of their company access to talent, while a further 58 wanted to upskill members of their own community. By investing in your own community within your business, you're telling them that they're valued and that they are needed for the future of the company. So the final words from myself with respect to the Trailblazers is the workforce of tomorrow are the skills we need of the future are going to be very different from the skills we need today. So as we look to recover economically, I believe the early careers programs such as apprenticeships will be key. Why? Because apprenticeships are tried and tested, but they have the ability to shape the future, bring in the new talent, upskill our current staff, and even reskill staff where we find they have a particular talent. And then there's any questions, back to you.
Thanks, Amanda. That was really useful to understand how you guys have worked through that. And I actually made on my notes. You summarised it, but I put that the workforce planning and the skills for the future is so important. Not just safety, and David says this, doesn't he, that we shout safety and whisper skills, but it's really important that training side of things for future development. That's great. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask David, I'm going to ask Robert now if there are any questions either for Amanda or for Andrew.
Yes, this one is for Andrew. Are your international equivalent organisations also concerned about DWHLs, and how can this issue be better communicated outside the UK?
Yes, they are. The equivalent of my organisation, we all get together at something called the Marine Accident Investigators International Forum. 56 members. So the big safety organisations like Transport Safety Board in America, US Coast Guard, Australian Transport Safety Board, TSB Canada, lots and lots of our continental cousins are on the thing, and it is a hot topic for us. One of our problems is that we tend to come along after the event, so we're looking at accidents that have happened and making recommendations to try and prevent future accidents. Thinking of that, the sort of Heinrich's triangle, you've got very serious accidents at the bottom, and along the bottom you've got these plethora of near misses, and I think sometimes you need a serious accident before you can get things like legislation across the bar. So when you've got a plethora of small accidents, it is the education piece which is going to win the day. That's where we're at the moment. I'm hoping we're not going to get a serious one. The education will win the day. But yes, collectively we are worried about it. What levers can we pull? I'm not sure yet.
That's clear. There's something for Amanda now, and I think it's possibly less of a question, more an observation, but I think it's quite interesting nonetheless. You're right, Amanda, that a greater and clearer understanding of the apprenticeship programme demands including the off-the-job hours requirements by employers, and this certainly helps the number of apprentices within the port sector. I mean, I guess the question behind that is, you know, you said that you sort of it took a while for you to work through what some of that 20% thing is. That just a communication problem at the outset?
I think at the outset we were all looking at what does 20% of the job mean, and we had to work it out as a group and with the Institute for Apprenticeships. And that's where the guides that they've now brought out are actually really helpful. If you go onto the website, it does take away a lot of the myths about what we thought they had to have a block number of days off every year, and it's not necessarily that way. We can actually use what we're doing within the ports as part of that off the job, because we are teaching them new skills when they're in the port itself, which is relevant to that apprenticeship.
Yep, understood. I've just put out a last call for questions, but that's where we're at the moment. So if you're listening and you want to jump in, now's a good time whilst we still have Amanda and Andrew on the call. But if not, I'm just going to be handing over to Jen.
Thanks for that, Robert. Yeah, just thank you everyone for attending today. I hope that you found it useful. Thank you very much for our brilliant speakers, both Amanda and Andrew, and also our for Rian and our session, and Nicola in our session this morning. I don't think there's anything further from me if there are no other questions.
Other than just one, how can people find organisations that are running apprenticeships and apply? So I don't know if Amanda has a view on that. She's still with us.
Yep, sure. Sorry, just had to get it all switched back on. If you go into the Institute for Apprenticeship website where they have their standards, there is actually a box that to one side where you can put in where your organisation is, so your postcode, or where you would like the training, and it'll bring up the training providers for that particular apprenticeship. So it is on the Institute for Apprenticeships website.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, thank you very much for everyone for tuning in. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you for Jen, who I don't think was expecting to chair the second session. So sorry for dropping you in that. The slides will be available from PSS afterwards. And should you have any questions, just get in touch with Sharon there. But thank you very much for joining, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Have a great day.